Hello, everyone, and welcome to Common Time Podcast, where we bring you world-class professional development for music educators straight to your phone. I'm David Clemmer.
And I'm John Pasquale.
And we are your hosts and fellow music educators. In each episode, we will interview a guest who is an expert in their field, here to provide us insight, strategies, and inspiration to help you elevate your ensemble. Our guest today is Mr. John Alstrin from the Prosper Independent School District in Prosper, Texas. Welcome, John.
Hey guys, great to be here.
Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it. Mr. Alstrin is in his 6th year as the Director of Fine Arts for Prosper ISD and in his 24th year as a music educator, having taught both at the secondary and university levels. Mr. Alstrin earned his bachelor's degree in music education from Texas Christian University and his master's degree in applied music from the University of Houston, where he also served as the Associate Director of Bands. At the high school levels, Mr. Alstrin served as the Associate Director at LD Bell High School in Hurst, Texas from 2009 to 2014, and at Prosper High School from 2014 to 2019. Ensembles under his direction have earned numerous accolades, including recognition as a finalist at Bands of America Grand Nationals and at the Texas State Marching Band Contest. Mr. Alstrin has served on brass staffs for the Madison Scouts and Cavaliers Drum and Bugle Corps and is affiliated with multiple professional organizations, currently representing fine arts directors on the UIL Marching Band Rules Advisory Committee. Mr. Alstrin lives in Prosper, Texas with his wife, Christina, and their 3 children, Colin, Addison, and Harper. So today we're going to talk about the path from being in the classroom to being an administrator. And Dr. Pasquale, why don't you kick us off?
Indeed. Thanks, David. Hi, John. It is great to see you. Good morning.
Good morning. Great to see you too.
So I'm just going to kick things off. So either as a teacher or administrator, what is either the most funny or memorable moment that you're able to share to our listeners as the school year begins?
That's a tough one. So many memories come to mind, but I think the one that I would share with you guys to lead off would be my last year as a band director at Prosper High, 2018. We were not slated to go to the Bands of America Grand National Contest. We had just been in 2017, and we were semifinalists. It's the first time we had done anything that big in Prosper history. And when I saw the list come out of participants for BOA, there was not a single school coming from Texas. And so knowing that we were about to split and open our second high school, Rock Hill High School, I knew that the days were numbered for us to take the show on the road with such a large group. And I also knew that it was important before we split to try to get some momentum so that those kids that were taking over the new high school had seen the mountaintop and knew where they wanted to be, and that would build the leaders that we needed. So we called BOA and we were able to get the first spot in prelims. It was like a 7:15 a.m. start. So the memory is walking down the tunnel in Indy and walking into the building and there not being another band or props or anything in sight. And so we just took that as an opportunity to hype the kids. You know, we were up at like 4:30 a.m. We had a brief rehearsal before we got there, and we were doing our chants and our cheers, and the kids were just loving it. So we took an opportunity like that, and we just made the best impression that we could, and ended up making finals that year. So it was a great run. It was a great trip for us, but that will always be one of my favorite memories.
That's awesome. I love walking into the tunnels like when you just first see the stage. I remember my first time on drum corps, like the first time we did drum corps, just walking out and being like, okay, well, here we are. It's such a cool moment. It's that feeling.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, it's
absolutely.
really real. All right, so let's jump into a little more serious. What is your philosophy of music education, and how do you inspire and guide your staff to sort of realize, what your philosophy is for the programs that you're overseeing?
Yeah, for sure. I think it would start with, an epiphany that I had a couple years into teaching. We had Harry Beejan come down to Lake Highlands to rehearse the group, and we were putting in an application for Midwest, ended up going to Midwest. And at the meal that we had with him, before we said goodbye for the evening, he looked at me and he said, "Just remember, John, it's all about music." And I was like, sometimes the most obvious things are the most profound. And I thought, yeah, of course it's all about music. But then as I reflected on that more and more and more, I realized that what he was telling me was that it's not about going to Midwest or the accolades or going to Grand Nationals. It's about music. And so I think that is one of my core memories as I was developing my own philosophy. And so I guess if music is as an art form is the chicken, then the egg would be growth and success as people and musicians, So it's the chicken and the egg philosophy, and it all comes back to music. And there's a kind of a yin and yang to that, I think that as I've grown, I've leaned on John Wooden's definition of success more and more, and I've been spreading that philosophy more and more. Self-satisfaction and knowing that you've done everything that you can do to get the job done at the highest level, and only you know if you're successful. Results are separate from that. So, I talk to teachers a lot about that, going back to the yin and yang of success, goals. Where we are in school, and so we have to have scholastic measures and ways that we benchmark our progress, but we also have to talk about the process. We have to talk about the art, the enjoyment, and the fun of everything. And, there's a certain zen to that, like doing it for the sake of doing it and being in the music just for the sake of being in the music, regardless of the result. Right.
Yeah.
And we are all married to this thing in the arts that we joke about in our office all the time, like competitive arts have just turned into this really like this beast, like competitive theater, one act play is, how we're going to measure our success as human beings, and how many people we have going to the state vase contest for art. Like everything is infused with this competitive aspect. And so like learning to live with that and understand it without becoming a slave to it. I think that's really my philosophy. And usually as I'm diagnosing situations, I can tell if somebody's too into success and competition, or if maybe not enough, they're not thinking about, measures and pushing kids to be their best selves and their best version as an artist.
Certainly fascinating, right? How we get so entrenched in the outcome or the success.
I was trying
and
to
we sometimes forget about it's about the student experience and it's about art, right?
Right.
So
I was trying to remember this quote, and I just looked it up. That Bartok said, "Competitions are for horses, not artists," and which is so true. Like when you think about I moved from Kentucky several years ago, and like horse racing is a huge thing, and people are throwing money at it. It's just, it's a huge, it's gigantic. But then we think about, you just mentioned like we compete on vases, like what like who
on
has the
vase? It's a
crazy
circuit for scholastic
Right.
art, like
Yeah.
competitive art. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fantastic, obviously, to have a measure to help propel growth.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
balancing that, I think it's awesome that you're helping your teachers, the people that you oversee, kind of find a middle ground there.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it pushes you to be your best version of yourself, and so it's good to have somebody to compete or something to compete, even if you are just competing against yourself, previous versions of your own self as an artist.
Indeed. So then, John, as an administrator of a large school district, what are some of the common challenges that you see in the public school system that specifically band directors are facing? And then how do they, or how should they go about possibly addressing those proactively?
Yeah, I've got several thoughts on this, and it kind of ties into that previous thread. An unsustainable path due to some issue, like you look at some teachers and I just can look at them and say, you're not going to make it. Like you're going to tap out. You're not going to make it to retirement. You're going to find you're either too interested in competition, success, results, ego, or you're too curious about how much money you could make doing something else. So you haven't set those reservations aside. Like, hey, I'm just not going to make as much money as maybe my high school classmate who works for fill in the blank company is making 3 times as much, doing half as much work as I'm doing. It's just so tempting. So I think, when we sign up to be a teacher, when I know certainly when Dr. Pasquale and I left TCU, we were in it to win it. I had a feeling that he was going to be a successful marching band director at some university because he was saying that at that time. And I knew that I was going to end up at some small school that had never done anything and try to build it, because that was one of my goals leaving. But we were both signed up for the long term. I didn't see either of us tapping out early. So it's just kind of a feeling, So I think it comes back to those that have a vision for where they want to be, what the long term looks like, and then not losing a sense of balance. you got to find that balance. You have to have hobbies and passions outside of school. For me, it's my family, and spending time with my son on the golf course, or watching soccer, or just swimming in the pool together. Like I learned how to turn it off, and of course, we have all got to put our health as a priority. And it's so easy to just get into this pressure cooker of a job, and it's like you're a ticking time bomb. If you take things way too seriously, or you're way too into the competitive thing, like staff meetings on Saturdays and Sundays, and going out every night after rehearsal to talk about what you're going to do the next day. The life of a competitive, 5A, 6A high school band director is just takes its toll. So you've got to put your health first. You got to find that balance, and not get overwhelmed by the kids, the parents, the schools, the changing systems, because it is getting tougher to teach every year. It is. I think I've been in it long enough to say that, and I think that some of those challenges in education are coming from parents and school boards and systems where it almost feels like the schools are being set up to fail at times. The state of Texas has a $32 billion surplus, but doesn't put a dollar into education. Why are they doing that? Like there's challenges that we don't have any control over that just make it tougher and tougher to do our thing the way that we've done it. So, I think the lack of resources, and we're certainly blessed and prosper to have such a supportive school board and superintendent that invests money into the arts and our programs, and allows us to hire assistant choir directors at the middle school level. Like there's a reason that all of our programs are flourishing and have success. It's the resources. And I know that that's not the story for 90% plus of school districts in America. And so I think as a country and a society, we have to invest, because I don't see how teachers are going to make that long haul if they don't have that support of the community and with literal resources. So I think my advice would be to be proactive about finding solutions, address the problems, and put yourself in an advocacy position in every conversation that you're in. You have to kind of become Neo in the Matrix. Like you have to get in there and figure it out and go, why is this not working? How do I solve this riddle? And that's one of the things that I think that is most, and I guess it brings me joy to know that I am in the Matrix fighting. Sometimes I refer to my job as a battle station rather than, an administrator, because it feels like I'm having to challenge things. And there's times that you go into a fight where you're going to lose, but you still have to make a case. And I know I'm kind of rambling on this one, but I use the analogy of metaphor of a battering ram. Like sometimes you have to take that battering ram on the castle gate and keep hitting it, and you're not going to break through on the first attempt, and you have to know you're not going to break through, but you just have to keep on, because eventually, if you're right, you're going to win, but it might take time.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. This next question might actually tie together with some of that, because I'm curious. You've built highly successful band programs as associate director, and then as a director, and now serving as a fine arts administrator. What are the things that you now know and deal with that you wish you had known while you were teaching, if you could go back in time?
Yeah, I think the thing that I see now is time. I see time differently. When you're in it, it feels like it's dragging on, and that it's taking forever to do anything, and it just feels like it's going to last forever. And when you're out of it, you realize how fast it went by. Right. And I wish I could get that time back with those kids. I wish that I could have more in-depth conversations with the kids that I didn't get to know as well. Like I've been to so many, as we all have, so many graduation ceremonies in my life. And when I watch those seniors graduate, and I reflect and I go, I don't really know that kid. I should know that kid better, because there's 60 seniors, and that one got by me. I just never had a really great relationship. And so having the time back with those students and with the music, I think that's one thing that I see now, that if I was to go back, I would be more deliberate, and I wouldn't squander as much time with my kids and all the stakeholders, the parents, and not miss those opportunities to develop those relationships. And at the end of the day, like another, famous adage is, nobody's going to remember the trophies. Nobody's going to remember what place that you got. They're just going to remember how you made them feel and the relationships that you had with them. And so I think that's the lens that I have now that if I could go back, I would see it, I think, a lot clearer.
Yeah, that's great advice for everybody, every day, all day.
Yeah.
Is making connections and not squandering the time we have with the people around us. So, man, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
Right on.
So then, John, speaking of relationships, do you have any advice for how to build a strong relationship between the high school band director, middle school band director, elementary school teacher, and their administrator?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's low-hanging fruit everywhere on this one. Like, I just see way too many people that aren't even trying.
That's probably true.
You have to consider that your administrators are people too, and they were once teachers, and I think that there's a certain level of distance that administrators create intentionally, so that, because at the end of the day, you might have to have a tough conversation with somebody. So it's tough to become a friend with an administrator at times, but you can still get to know them, and that friendship may develop over time. But that should not serve unintentionally as a pedestal. Like, you shouldn't have to worship somebody above you on the food chain. Like, don't be intimidated. They're just a person. And you can be polite and respectful and curious about them without falling all over yourself trying to be their friend. And so there are certain separations and lanes that we all live in, but I think it's all part of being professional. I think a lot of people have forgotten that we are professionals, and you should be able to have poised, calm, mature conversations with your bosses and not be intimidated by them, and that's one of the things that I've learned in administration, because I've gotten to know a lot of administrators, and they're amazing people. They are really good at their job. They didn't get there by accident. Somebody believed in them, and they demonstrated and proved themselves as a good person. So that's why I say there's low hanging fruit everywhere. Is there's people that you can connect with and develop a relationship with, and again, not to be transactional, but just because it's the right thing to do, and that's how you function as a professional. And then the last thing I would say is very specific advice that has been one of our talking points in the office in Prosper, and that is, spend the extra 5 minutes with somebody. When it feels like the conversation's over, spend an additional 5 minutes asking them questions, being curious, going deeper. And if it feels like they've got to go, let them go. Don't hold them there as a prisoner for 5 minutes. But if you have the time, spend the extra 5 minutes. And I think that that's what people, especially in the country, do better than people in the city. I think that people in the country are not as much in a hurry. Like I've had people come and, work on our propane tank the other day, and the guy just kept talking. I was like, you're just a really nice person, and you've got great stories, and he's just as country as can be. And I think that that's the thing is you have to kind of slow down and not be in a hurry. And it kind of goes back to that previous answer about taking the time with people. So it's the same thing serves true with adults.
We should probably have, entitled this something about relationships, because I feel like we have a common theme that's happening here. It's just, we're talking about teaching and administration and so forth, but it's all, the answers have largely revolved around building relationships with students and people around you. Yeah.
One further thought with that, David, to tie it back into music education, and that is, this is how I was with my students. And I am saying I wish I would have done more, but I was already doing it. And that's the thing that's what I think what my kids would say about me, is that we had great relationships, and developing them in sectionals and rehearsals and between rehearsals. And so when it came time to make music, we could connect like that because we were a team. We felt like a team. And it was all because they were authentic, not transactional, but they were authentic. Like, I was really curious about the kids, and I wanted to get to know them, again, with boundaries as a professional. But in order to make music together, you have to be able to trust each other. So,
yeah, John, that's incredible. I kind of, on the flip side of that, since we're talking about relationships, what would you say to band directors that are dealing with conflict within, their own staffs? I know the things come up, like even between administrators and directors, but how do you deal with conflict?
Yeah, it's normal. Expect it. Mm-hmm. Don't wait for a time when there's no conflict. It's never going to happen. And the more time you spend together, the more conflict there's going to be. Show me a family that doesn't have conflict, and it's normal and it's healthy. And if you lean into it, you can discover things. I've done a book study. We did one at U of H that David Burton been assigned to the grad students. We read The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And then I went back and had the fine arts team read it a couple years ago in Prosper. And one of the dysfunctions of a team is that you don't want a bunch of yes men.
Yep.
You want people that can disagree with you and push back, because that's how a company grows. And if a company's full of yes men that never want to have conflict, then you don't grow, you don't become the best. So you have to learn how to embrace conflict as a driver in conversation in a positive and professional way. And it, a lot of times it trains back to power and ego, and that's usually the driving force behind conflict. My ideas for the show are better than your ideas, or we shouldn't do this piece, we should do this piece. The thing that I would say is, at the end of the day, none of us got a degree in counseling, so we should not try to act like we're counselors. You're not a trained counselor. So I think I see a lot of head directors that try to function as a counselor for their team, and I don't think that they should. I think that you have to learn how to be professional and have those conversations. But there's times that you might need to pull somebody else in, like a neutral party, like another administrator or another coworker or colleague to kind of run mediator if it's going to be a heated conversation. But you definitely want to save the drama for your mama, like leave it out of the room. That's where it gets off the rails, is when all of a sudden we get the drama into it. And I think that a couple other little side thoughts on this is that the kids can pick up on the fact that there's tension in a team. So don't try to pretend like it's not there. Like a team that has tension and is not addressing it is a powder keg situation. And those kids are so intuitive. They know that the guard teacher does not like the drum teacher. They don't know why. They just know
Right.
that they don't act like friends. And so things like that impact the overall projects that you're working on, whether it's inside or outside in the band world. And so we don't all have to be best friends, but we have to at least be professional enough to fake it, or even better, work on that conflict so that you can resolve it, learn from it, grow, and rebuild that trust with your staff. And I think that is really ultimately one of the messages that we can send to our students is like, this is how healthy, functioning adults work. And we don't always agree, but this is how it goes. This is what you want to be like when you grow up. That's what we should be role modeling for our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to show you this. So I keep this on my desk. I've
There
read
you
this,
go.
I don't know, probably 15 times. I've given it as gifts. So if you're listening, this is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. It's a leadership fable by Patrick Lencioni. He has a bunch of books out, but if you're watching on YouTube, that's it. And it is a fantastic book. It's a business book, but I've used it for leadership training with high school kids. I've used it in staff meeting. It's just awesome. So I'm glad you brought that up. And you're
Absolutely.
right. Conflict, positive. Conflict can reveal what we all need to be looking at, and that's how growth happens. So, man, it's an awesome book. Thanks for bringing it up.
Absolutely.
All right, John. So, just to continue the conversation about relationships, do you have strategies that band directors can use to maintain positive relationships with school administration and the broader community as a whole?
Yeah, I think, with COVID being over and we keep talking about relationships, I think that they're absolutely key. And I think that they all begin with that first impression. I think that, again, going back to Pasquale, I've known him since he was 18 years old. And one of the things that Pasquale has always done is a really firm handshake with a sincere smile and great eye contact. And so John was always able to make a really strong first impression with everybody that he met. And that makes a difference. And I think it's not only a firm handshake and a smile, but it's being curious and wanting to know that other person, whether they're above you or below you on the food chain of it all, or they teach a different subject, or they're the custodian. Like, you should just do that with everybody that you come in contact with. And if you do, and you are sincere and genuine with it, everybody notices. How you talk to the last chair triangle versus how you talk to the first chair flute, they should be the same. You should be just as curious. You should not unintentionally, prioritize your top band kids or your first chairs. And, when you go into a rehearsal, you would hope that the kids could not identify who your favorites were. I think that is so key, because you're going to need all of those kids to be with you mentally, and like we talked about earlier, trust you and believe in your vision for how the music should go, that they would want to listen to you. And if they don't want to listen to you, they will tune you out. They will go somewhere else in their brain. And so that's one of the things that I was able to do with my kids, is get everybody on the same page. And I won't lie and say that I had 100% all of the time, but we had way better batting averages than most. And I learned all of that from Tom Bennett at U of H. Was there's no way you can get everybody to function as an ensemble if they're not all thinking the same thing at the same time. Like, we're going to run letter J to letter K, and I want you thinking about staying full of air at all times, and I want you to match the energy of the person sitting to your left and right. That's our goal for this segment. And then you play this segment. Okay, what were the goals? And if everybody in the room can't raise their hand and say those two objectives, then they weren't thinking as an ensemble. So those are small examples of how you can apply something, whether you're working on daily drill and fundamentals or music. It's all about thought. Well, I'll use the term thought control, right? That's a terrible implication. That we're not manipulating their minds. We're getting them to all be on the same page and think as one. So I hope that answered your question. I kind of wandered into trying to weave back in some rehearsal.
No, it's all good.
And music. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's a calibration of sorts, right? You're trying to calibrate your thinking and the students' thinking and expectations, and it's just a large exercise in calibration.
Yeah, man, there's so many directions we could go with this, because the conversation, we have kind of steered into new ground. I'd love to spend more time with your thoughts on there. But I do want to ask, as we start to wrap up here, we've been talking about relationships. I want to switch over to just some hands-on things that directors deal with, and primarily one that can be problematic is budgeting. So how do you approach budgeting and resource allocations within your programs? What advice do you have to give band directors on managing their own budgets? And you're overseeing that stuff, so what are you seeing?
Yeah, let me start with the micro and then go to the macro. I'll start with the second question first, which is my advice to directors as they're planning their budget. First of all, it's not going to all happen in one planning session. It is an ongoing process of reevaluation and calibration, to use that word. And you can't do it alone. You need to pull in if you have boosters, band boosters, you need to pull in those adults to help get that into a form so that you have a functioning booster budget. And I think that that's the case for most programs in America, as they're getting most of their money from kids' fees or fundraisers. And so it's running through their parent organization. And so you have to have ideally more than one treasurer, if not a finance committee. You want to look for those parents that have a background as a CPA or something. Like, you need, because we're basically running these small businesses with 100,000, 200,000 plus budgets. And so you need other adults in the room. And so as you calculate month by month, you should know what's coming in and what's going out monthly, and have a monthly forecast. And you have to factor things in, like winter guard season. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen people get to like January, February, and you're almost out of money. And you have a director that says, hey, we want to go to this drumline contest. And you're like, well, we didn't think about that. Or we need a new winter guard mat. Well, that's not in the budget. And so you have to think project by project, and you have to be, chronological in how that goes. And then you have to have enough money in May to pay for things to get you ready for summer band the next year. So you have to think through the calendar year. And that's the thing, is, like I've said, it can't be all done in one meeting, and you can't do it alone. You have to get help. And ultimately, you don't want everything to live in your treasurer's brain, and then they move to Idaho, and all of a sudden you don't know what's going on with the books. Like that would never happen in a business. So you have to treat it as such. And then as far as the school funding goes, from my desk, I'm managing art, band, choir, dance, orchestra, theater, cheerleading, Suzuki strings, music electives. Like, we have so many. We have 180 fine arts teachers, 3 high schools, about to be 4 high schools. So we're ordering for Richland High School for next year. It's big. It's a lot of money, and we're the fastest growing school district in North Texas. And Paso, I think it's us and Katy ISD in Houston area, and then we might be the 2 of the fastest growing districts in America. So there's a lot of decisions that need to be made about dollars. And Fortunately, unfortunately, dollars reflect values. And we have kids that are paying way too much to be a cheerleader, and they're paying way too much to be on the drill team. And we have priced some kids out of those activities. The same is true for bands. Band fees are too high. I'm not going to go into numbers. But when we are pricing kids out, we don't even know we're doing it, because what's happening is it's trickling out into the community that it costs this much to be in that program. And so people will decide early, like in 6th or 7th grade, that they're not going to head that way because they hear how much time it takes and how much it costs to do this thing in high school. And again, to circle back to our previous talking point about competition, everything is so competitive, especially like in this North Texas DFW area. Like kids specialize in what they're doing. Like we were talking about my son before, who's, he's ranked in the top 100 of high school golfers in the class of 2026, also plays in the high school band, first chair in Reagan Brumley's band at Walnut Grove. And he had to specialize in golf when he was like 9, because that's what's happening. I mean, whether it's gymnastics or the oboe or the piano or what, dance, these kids are starting it earlier and earlier, and they're starting to specialize and just say, I'm just going to do this one activity because I know that that's what it's going to take to play it in high school at a competitive level or in college. So with kids specializing in these things, and they get to these scholastic programs, so we have to remember this is still school, it's still public education. So they can spend all they want on private dance academy, but then why does it cost so much to be on the high school drill team? So that's where I wish that this is where I'm the battering ram. I'm actively working to help make sure that we have affordable programs for kids to be in, and that our dollars reflect our values. So if we value having a big band, a big drill team, big cheer squad at Friday Night Lights, then let's find the way to get those kids the money so that they can have the clinicians and teachers and choreographers and writers and arrangers and all of these things that's their curriculum. So how do I get the schools to help pay for those things that we believe in and not saddle the bill to the family that has got 5 kids and they can't afford it? There's got to be those balancing acts. And that's my function as an administrator, is to do those acrobatics to make sure that I'm making it accessible for kids.
Yeah. So then, John, as a follow-up to that, there are many directors across the country that don't have the financial resources that are found in Texas. So do you have advice for them on how to advocate and just basically survive financially in extremely difficult times?
Yeah, it's a tough one because I don't know other people's calculus and I don't know their problems. And I think it's a little Pollyanna to say, well, just do this. Because I know that there are school districts that are hurting and that they don't have the fast growth allotment that we have, that we get from the state to make everything possible. We're still operating on a deficit budget this year in Prosper ISD, but like take Houston ISD, for instance, they have a $1.9 billion budget, but they're operating a $140 million deficit budget. Yeah. So telling them, well, just do this. If you just hired these people, or you made this, all the uniforms accessible, like we were talking about a second ago, it's just, I guess my best advice, if you're in one of those situations, is you've got to learn how to lean on the community, find corporate sponsors, find the parents that can write a check, do one of the online fundraisers. Those things are making programs $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. You got to, like, I've been part of programs that had 8, 9, 10 fundraisers. In Prosper, we limit our groups to 2 fundraisers a year. You're not allowed to do more than 2 because we don't want the kids focusing on that. We want them focusing on being a student. And so whatever fundraisers we do, you got to make a lot of money. In my last year in 2018 with Prosper Band, I think we had about $25,000 in corporate sponsors. So people just writing checks just to sponsor the group. So I think there's ways to do it. You just have to figure out how you're going to hack all of that. And, ultimately, unfortunately, I think that kids are going to have to pay to play to some degree. I think student fees are really the thing that make the difference. And unfortunately, the price point for the top shelf designers, writers, arrangers, it's just getting higher and higher. But I still think if you can make the case for the fact that is curriculum, I think you got to find your people that are in charge of curriculum instruction in your district and make that case. Like we need better stuff for our kids to work on, whether that's choreography or drill. And so I think that's a strong case to be made. And we certainly, again, if we follow the dollars, there is enough money flowing through districts. And unfortunately, things are set in place other places. And so they're having to make tough decisions, whereas we're growing in Prosper. So we're able to advocate, like I said earlier, for that middle school choir director that's going to make the difference to grow the program. So again, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't want to sound preachy about telling other people what to do to advocate. And I realize that we're just in a really fortunate situation where we are in Prosper ISD. So I hope that answers your question without answering your question.
No, that's awesome, John. Our last question, it's very simple. We ask it straightforward to everyone. What is your favorite time signature?
Oh my gosh. It's common time.
Boom! The first one. Yes. Well done. It's very interesting. We've gotten some weird answers on that one from all kinds of different answers, but every single person has some special reason why they said it. Like Jerry Junker really prefers 7/8 because of how you can mix it around and do all the different things. So, but we've always been looking for common tag. So,
he's a way better musician than I am. Let's just keep it right down the middle, 4/4 to the floor.
That is awesome. Okay, everyone, that's a wrap for this episode of Common Time Podcast. We hope you gained some valuable insights and inspiration to take back to your ensemble. New episodes of Common Time Podcast drop every Monday. We hope you enjoy the show. Please take a moment to leave us a rating or a review on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us reach more music educators just like you. And a special thanks to our wives, Jessica and Theresa, for keeping us organized enough to make this happen. Also, don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media platforms at Common Time Podcast for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and more. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Keep making music and keep making a difference.